Hello everyone, I am Chaudhuri Moniruzzaman. I am a researcher at the Institute for the Environment, UNC Chapel Hill. Today I will talk about effects of aircraft source characterization on air mode model performance for a major US airport. I will start with a little background. Aircraft landing and takeoff emission contribute to poor surface air quality in and around airport, which affects human health. Dispersion modeling helps to quantify the effects of aircraft emission on surface air quality. FAA's AEDT currently characterizes the airport sources and produce emission files for air mode dispersion modeling. ADT produced emission files typically have 1000 surface sources and around 5000 to 8000 airborne sources, which makes the hourly emission files a little big and sometimes little difficult to handle for a big time period. A new emission processor can change the number of sources desired by the dispersion model users and produce emission file using the raw ADT flight segment data. Air mode modeling for different source number options may help choose the better source characterizations for dispersion modeling for airport source. The study was motivated by two research needs. First, the effects of airborne emission on surface air quality in dispersion modeling remains poorly understood. The second motivation, there is a research need to explore the effect of reducing the number of sources in FAA's ADT produced hourly input emission file for air modes. The study has three objectives. The first, study the effects of air emission on surface air quality by AEDT emission files. Then, second, develop a Python-based emission processor named hereafter as AEDT2 ADM to produce emission file using the AEDT's flight segment data. The third, effects of reduction of number of sources at surface on computation time and model performance by air mode dispersion model. In this slide, I will explain ADT and ADT segment data. ADT provides hourly emission files for area sources for air mode dispersion model for airport sources. And AEDT to ADM emission processor, which we have developed, which takes ADT segment flight data, which comes from ADT, and also user input shape files, which is latitude and longitudes for each sources. And output of this emission processor is hourly emissions files for air mode and other dispersion models, hourly engine data for plume rise models, and it has options for area, volume, point, and line source. And this table shows the difference between ADT area and ADT segments. And the number of sources in raw files in ADT area is around 6000, and in ADT segments around 70,000 segments for one day and around 1544 flights per one day and 46 segments for one flights. A number of sources at surface is around 1200 in ADT area and 138 we have designed. The red color is we have designs, and the blue color is in the right column is what is present in the ADT segment data file. And the number of sources in air is around 4400 in ADT area and 144 in our emission processor we have designs. So a new emission processor AEDT to ADM has been developed to study aircraft emission in dispersion modeling. This slide shows the map of the modeling airport, which is the Los Angeles International Airports. You can see the airport is in the center of the map, and it has four runways, two in the north and two to the south. And you can see in this map there are four monitor sites, which is AQ, CN, CS, and CE. So model predictions were compared with the observations from these four sites. And most flights directions are east to west, and the air quality monitors are within the 2 km from the nearest runway, which are shown in the left table. This slide shows the model configurations. Airport, Los Angeles International Airport, simulation period February 2012, dispersion model, air mode versions 21112, input emission data, ADT air mode input file, and ADT2 ADM emission processor produced emission files using the raw ADT flight segment data as input. Meteorology data processed through AirMed, surface data, Los Angeles Airport, and upper air soundings data from the San Diego Marine Corps air stations, which is 120 miles from LAX. Simulation species SO2, SO2 assumed as SOx as 98% fuel sulfur contents uh, is converted to SO2, and SO2 is chosen because jet fuel has high fuel sulfur content and has less non-aircraft emission sources. Initial vertical dispersion parameters sigma z naught used 4.1 meter for runway and taxi sources, whereas 3 meter for gate sources, and four cases were run by the air mode model. This is the wind profile. The left figure shows the monthly average and the right figure shows the each days in February. And the winds are normally westerly in the daytime and easterly in the nighttime. This slide shows the flight and emission profiles of SOx at surface and in air. The first figure shows the hourly number of flights at LAX on February 6th. By our calculations from the ADT segment data, which is blue line, and uh, the real data from LAVA, which is the red lines. And this figure shows the hourly emission rates of SOx for the same day, and the blue line is the our calculation from the ADT segment data, and the red line is from the ADT processed emission data, which shows that blue and red line exactly matches. And the right bottom figure shows the percentage of emissions at surface and different altitudes. And about 50% SOx emissions occur at surface at LAX, and most emissions occur during daytime at LAX. This slide shows that we have done two tasks. Task 1, which is the sensitivity study 1, the study the effects of airborne emissions on surface air quality using the ADT emission files. And task 2, which is the sensitivity study 2, develop an emission processor to characterize source and produce emission files desired by user using the ADT flight segment data, and then quantify and compare the model performance in different source characterizations modeled by the new emission processors. This slide describes the task 1, which is effects of airborne emissions on surface air quality. And air emissions is the emissions from aircrafts in air from altitude 12 to 914 meter sources. And we ran two cases. Case 1, which is using ADT emission files for both surface and air, and case 2, which is using ADT emission files but only for surface sources. And our task 1 is case 1 minus case 2. That gives the effects of air emission on surface concentrations. And the bottom left figure shows the location of the sources for case 1, which is both surface and air. And bottom right figure is the location of sources for the case 2, which is only for surface sources. This slide shows the result of task 1, which is airborne emissions effects. The fourth figure shows the comparison of model prediction of hourly average SO2 concentration for entire month of February with observation at 4 sites. The black line is the observations, and the blue line is the case for only surface, and red line is the case for both surface and air. The result shows that there's very little difference between the red and blue, which is both surface and air and only surface, meaning the contribution of air emission source on surface is very less. The result shows that airborne emission has little effects at AQ during 8 to 11 am. Effects are negligible at CS and has little effects at CE and CN during 10 am to 10 pm. This slide also shows the results of task 1, which is airborne emission effects. The left four figure is the QQ plot, which is the model comparison of model prediction with observations. The y-axis is model prediction and the horizontal axis is the observations. And this fourth figure shows that there is a little or negligible effects between red and blue, meanings that air emissions contributions are negligible. The most significant effects between or the difference between red and blue were found for side C, which is the left right figures. And also model predictions were the best at the C sites, which can also be seen in the last column in the right tables. The right table shows the period average observations and model predictions for two cases, which is surface and surface plus air. And the last column shows the air emissions contribution to total total as a percentage. And it shows that the uh, air emissions effects are modest, around 4 to 6% of total at three sites, which is AQCN and CS, and are as high as 13% at CE in 1 month's average results. This slide explains the AEDD to emission processor. Yellow color is the AEDD to ADM emission processors, and this shows the input output flow structures, which I already explained in my earlier slides. This map shows the map of user provided shape file for 138 surface sources. The sources are grouped in 5 categories shown in 5 colors. Red is the runway, yellow is the main terminal and gate, green is the taxiway, and blue is the taxi ramp, and cyan is the other terminals and gate. This slide describes the task 2, which is effects of reduction of surface sources on surface air quality. We run 3 cases: case 2 AEDT emission 1440 surface source, and case 3 AEDT to ADM emission processor 138 surface sources, and case 4 AEDT to ADM emission processor 31 surface sources. And we have two tasks, task 02A, which is case 03 minus case 02, which is effects of 90% surface source reduction on surface concentrations, and task 02B, which is case 04 minus case 02, effects of 98% surface source reductions on surface concentrations. And the bottom 3 figures shows the source location of case 2, case 3, and case 4. This slide shows the results of task 2, which is the different source characterizations. The fourth figure shows the comparison of model prediction of hourly average of SO2 for entire month of February with observation at 4 sites. The black line is the observations, and blue line is the ADT surface 1440 surface sources, and red line is the AEDT to ADM 138 surface sources, and pink line is the AEDT to ADM 31 surface sources. So the result, the figure shows that there is no big difference between the 3 run cases. And the summary of this slide is, although number of sources reduced from 1440 to 138 and to as few as 31, the diurnal profile did not change much from AEDT. This slide shows the results of task 2, and this 4 figure shows the 4QQ plot at 4 observation sites for 3 source number cases. The blue circle is the ADT surface source 1440 surface source, and red circle is the AD to ADM 138 surface sources, and pink circle is the AD to ADM 31 surface sources. So the figure shows that there is a little difference between the 3 source number cases, and model performance was best at CE sites. And this table shows the mean absolute error for 3 run cases at 4 observation sites for the 1 month results. And the right to green column shows the mean absolute error change percentage from 1440 to 138, the first green column, and then 1440 to 31 source, the second green column. And the result shows that both 90% to 98% source reductions, mean absolute error increases at 2 sites and decreases at 2 sites. This slide shows the comparison of only aircraft source with aircraft and non-aircraft source. Non-aircraft source are airport and non-airports. The right pie chart shows that 70% SOx emissions at LAX is non-airport source. This left 2 figures is the results of only aircraft source, and right 2 figures are both aircraft and non-aircraft source. So the result shows that inclusion of non-aircraft source improve model performance. This slide shows model performance for both only aircraft sources and aircraft and non-aircraft sources. Because of time, I will not discuss much. The summary of this slide is, inclusion of non-aircraft sources decrease negative biases at AQ and CN and increase biases at CS and CE. This slide shows the computation time change in reducing number of sources. The result shows 90% surface source reductions from 1440 to 138 decrease error mode computation time by 90%, and 98% surface source reductions from 1440 to 31 decrease error mode computation time by 95%. This is the summary. Air modeling shows that the contribution of air emissions on surface uh, is about 4 to 6% at 3 monitors and 13% at another monitors. A new emission processor AEDT to ADM has been developed, which can produce the hourly emission files for both air mode and other dispersion models. And air mode modeling results shows performance results that 90 to 98% surface source reductions decrease computation time by 90%, but does not decrease the model performance much. And because airborne emissions effects are less, the number of air sources in ADT can be reduced. These are some feature works. Model airborne sources as reduced number of sources in air mode. Compare airborne source for point and volume sources. Estimate model predictions by different source group and by different flight pathways. And produce sub-hourly emission files for sub-hourly run of dispersion modeling. Make runway source length smaller by slicing into small pieces. Run surface sources as volume sources. Produce aircraft's engine input file for the future plume rise model for the air mode for airport sources. Update the emission processor to produce emission files for other dispersion models and CMAC model. I want to acknowledge our sponsor, US Federal Aviation Administration, for supporting our projects. And thank you. And if I have time, I can take questions.